Today, we're going to look at 10 Genesis songs that could easily be mistaken for Phil Collins solo songs.
Just like Phil Collins.
So us Genesis and Phil Collins fans know that there is this era in the 80s and early 90s where Genesis songs and Phil Collins solo songs started to sound sort of similar. And it's understandable that some passive Phil Collins fans or just general fans of the radio might be confused as to what song was on No Jacket Required and what song was on Invisible Touch, or what song was on But Seriously and what song was on We Can't Dance. Now, I'm not here to debate whether or not Phil influenced Genesis, because we've already tackled that, and we know that Tony Banks was driving a lot of these songs.
Tony, and Tony.
We're going all the way back to the early 80s with Duke, which ironically is when Phil started writing his own songs. He started writing songs for Genesis, and he started writing songs for Face Value. And so this is where we start to hear what Phil Collins sounds like as a solo artist. And then you start to be able to pick out where you hear Phil Collins in Genesis music. So I have 10 songs. Now, they're not in order as the most Phil Collins sounding, although I'm sure we can discover that on our own, but I've decided to put them from oldest to most recent. So basically, we're just going from Duke until We Can't Dance. By the way, this is a ton of fun making lists like this. I hope you enjoy talking about Phil Collins and Genesis as much as I do. I love chatting with you in the comments as well. I'm learning a lot about Genesis and Phil Collins that I didn't know because you guys are teaching me in the comments. Thank you so much. Thank you for subscribing. This channel is growing, albeit slow, but it's growing, and I really appreciate it. So if you're just watching and tuning in, please think about subscribing. It'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, the first song is from Duke, and it's the song Misunderstanding. This is probably the most Phil sounding song, and I know for a lot of Genesis fans, it's one of their least favorite from Duke, and probably one of their least favorite of the hits. And I would kind of agree with that. Like I said, I did a review about I Missed Again recently and how I prefer I Missed Again. And these sound a lot alike, which makes a ton of sense. Like if Phil was just writing a lot of songs and this was like one of his many Motown inspired songs, and then he showed the band some of the songs he'd been writing for his solo project, and this is one of the ones they picked. Maybe it was further along than I Missed Again. We know in the I Missed Again demo, it was a lot of kind of gibberish and wasn't really evolved. So maybe the Misunderstanding demo was in better shape. I don't hate the song. It certainly sounds like a Phil Collins song. One of the things I've noticed about all 10 songs on my list here today is it's like the songs that have like the absence of Tony Banks the most, or the absence of Mike Rutherford, or both. And that to me is where it sounds like a Phil Collins song. And it's one of the things I love about Phil Collins' music is that he did a good job to say, that's what I'm doing in Genesis, and over here with Phil Collins, we're going to do something completely different. I really appreciate that. And honestly, I don't think any of these songs sound like Phil Collins entirely. Well, I guess I do. I made this list. As a diehard Phil Collins fan, a diehard Genesis fan, I know the difference. And it's usually found in the keyboards and the chord choices, because Tony's just a better keyboard player than Phil is. And so Phil is a little bit more basic when it comes to what chords he chooses for his ballads. So Misunderstanding to me is one where there's not a lot going on musically, aside from the bridge. Genesis are always great with bridges, so maybe that. But Misunderstanding, again, kind of that like classic Lamont sound, almost a little bit Tin Pan Alley. This Misunderstanding, I could totally see people misunderstanding as a Phil Collins song. Okay, on the same album is Please Don't Ask. Now, it's a beautiful tune. The lyrics are weird, like when he's like, oh, I saw you lost some weight. We wouldn't say that today. But Please Don't Ask this is a song that Phil says he wishes was on Face Value. And I've said this before, and some of you in the comments have said, this would have made a better Face Value closer, especially an album about divorce, than the Beatles cover Tomorrow Never Knows. So Please Don't Ask is a beautiful song, really beautiful chorus, not a Genesis song at all. Just does not sound like a Genesis song, does not match with the lyrical theme of Duke, does not match musically, melodically with Duke, although there were some kind of big songs like Alone Tonight and even Man of Our Times and Misunderstanding that were kind of melodic. So this does sort of work, but really lyrically and just the idea, it sounds like a singer-songwriter. It does not sound like a Genesis. Remember, Duke is coming out of, and then there were three, and they just had major success, or their biggest success so far, with Follow You, Follow Me. When they're listening to the demos from Phil and they hear Misunderstanding and they hear Please Don't Ask, those songs probably sound a lot like the same vibe and feel of Follow You, Follow Me. And they're probably thinking, we need to follow that up. We need to have another love song. And so they're probably dying for love songs at this point. So I could see why they would think, hey, maybe Please Don't Ask could be potentially be a single. But yeah, it's a shame it wasn't on Face Value. I think it would have improved Face Value. Not like that album needs improving, but I think it would have been better as a closer than the Beatles cover. Okay, let's move on to the next album, Abacab. And a song that sounds like a Phil solo tune is No Reply at All. In fact, you could wedge this, and really you can hear the eras, right? Because Abacab has similar sounds to Hello, and Duke has similar sounds to Face Value. And Invisible Touch sort of has similar sounds to No Jacket Required. But you can hear the horns, that the overall similar sound of It Don't Matter to Me and I Cannot Believe It's True. And then No Reply at All. I mean, they share a lot of similarities. The horns, listen, I know what it's like to be working on a record and you come across a really cool sound, whether that's a synth sound or nowadays you buy a plugin or some sort of a sample that you get, or you get a brand new guitar, or you find this beautiful electric guitar tone set up through a bunch of different pedals, and you want to use it all over the album. And if you're a producer or an engineer, you often want to use that sound on other projects that you're working on. That's why Phil would discover this gated reverb sound with Hugh Padgham and then use it not just on Peter's records, but on Genesis records and on his solo record and on Philip Bailey's record. And he would just go on to use that all the time because it's a cool effect and you just want to use it a lot. So I feel like this is happening with the Phoenix horns a little bit. I mean, now, we all know, we look back now and go, that was a mistake. Horns on Genesis was a mistake. I don't think Tony was there. I think we kind of pressured Mike by going to California and to putting the horns on this record. I just don't think it makes sense. I think Abacab is great. I'm going to do a review on it very soon. I think Abacab, well, I don't think it's great. I think it's good. I think it has some major problems, but it had major potential. And No Reply at All is a great tune, but it's those horns. And listen, I'm not here to criticize these songs. I'm just here to say this song sounds like a Phil Collins song. Yeah, so this tune could have definitely been on Hello, I Must Be Going. There is some like fast synth sounds that Tony is doing that maybe makes it a little bit Genesis, but not that much. Okay, on the same record, on Abacab, is another tune that it could be mistaken for a Phil Collins song. Now, it's not one that's played on the radio. Can you guess what it is? It's also an Abacab. Sounds like a Phil Collins solo song. I know you've already guessed it. All of my buddies out there know what I'm talking about. Man on the Corner. Man on the Corner, I think, sounds like a Phil Collins song. It is a Phil Collins song. Now, did Phil write it? Oh, gosh, I should have checked that. I'm sure he did. Pretty sure Phil wrote this tune. But remember, at this point, and just with Face Value coming out, Phil's sound is the drum machine, and I think on Man in the Corner, it could be the CR78 again. I don't quote me on that. I'm sure our viewers will tell me what it is. But on Man in the Corner, you have the drum machine, and then you have probably what would have been the Prophet synthesizer or whatever synth he was using at the time. And I don't know if it's Tony playing, and I'm sure it is Tony playing, and nobody else was allowed to touch a keyboard in that band. But just these very simple chords. And that sounds a lot like Phil. That's kind of Phil's signature sound. So this is why this tune sounds a lot like Phil Collins. Now, were they going for an In the Air Tonight a feel? Like In the Air Tonight had already been successful by the time this record came out. So maybe they were trying for some of that ominous Phil Collins pad to a drum machine sound. And of course, at the end of the song, it blows up with big drums. I think they're gated a little bit, and he's singing quite loud. So this kind of is like a little bit of a In the Air Tonight vibe. Maybe they were going for that, but I think that's what makes it sound so much. It reminds me of Tonight, actually, now that I think about it. I love this song. I have no criticisms about this song. I wish they would have gone in this direction a bit more. I wish Phil's solo stuff would have gone in this direction a bit more. It's very In the Air Tonight. And I think Man on the Corner is great, but you can hear how it would sound like a Phil Collins sound. Aside from the guitar, that kind of phased out guitar at the end brings in Rutherford's influences. Okay, how you doing for time? We good? Now, number 5 is Taking It All Too Hard from the Genesis self-titled record. This is kind of a weird era, and the self-titled record is hit and miss all over it. Big hits, amazing hits, and then some, not as low hits as Abacab, as we find on Abacab, or even as we find on We Can't Dance. It's hit and miss. We'll talk about that another day. But Taking It All Too Hard is, it sounds like a Phil tune. I don't think that there's a parallel to it on any of his solo records. Maybe you could tell me, what do you think this sounds like the most? Because this was kind of like This is before he changed his sound for No Jacket Required. So this reminds me a little bit of That's All, but a little bit slower. But yeah, it just sounds like Phil. You know, it's got his toms and it's got his I think one of the reasons too that this sounds to me like a Phil Collins song is because of the keyboard sound, which I believe would be that Yamaha CP70. And I could be wrong, but no, I think it is. And I just feel like that to me is a little bit more synonymous with Phil Collins and Phil Collins live. Although, of course, that's what they play on That's All. And it's also on Turn It On Again. But I don't know. I just feel like the keyboard sound sounds a lot like Phil and the drum sound. So taking it all too hard could be mistaken for a Phil Collins solo tune. Now, as we enter into the Invisible Touch era and beyond, we start to get into really blurred lines. And if you are a dental hygienist and you work in a dentist's office and you listen to Easy Rock Radio, you're going to be hearing You Can't Hurry Love, Another Day in Paradise, One More Night, True Colors, In Too Deep, Hold On My Heart, Throwing It All Away. And I could imagine if you are not a person who has a Phil Collins YouTube channel, that it could probably be a little difficult to figure out, wait, which one was Phil Collins? Which one was Genesis? So this is where I can understand things get a little tricky. And I think the song that encapsulates this video the most, the biggest whodunit is not whodunit, is In Too Deep. And that's my next one on my list. Number 6 is In Too Deep from Invisible Touch. This is the one that is the most, first of all, it's a ballad. We don't have a ton of ballads in Genesis. It's like this and Hold On My Heart and Since I Lost You. I could just see why it would be easily confused to be a Phil Collins song. Now, if you listen carefully on the bridge, some wicked chord changes. Really, really cool song. I think this is one of my favorite Genesis tunes. I say that about every song, but I really love In Too Deep. I thought on the 86 tour or the 87 tour, it sounded really, really good. I would have loved to hear it on the most latest tour. I was kind of disappointed I didn't hear this or Hold On My Heart. I'm big fans of this and Hold On My Heart because you really hear Tony Banks's keyboards in those songs. And that's how I know they're not Phil Collins songs. But for a lot of other people, I could see In Too Deep being probably one of the hardest ones to pick. I mean, listen, if we did if you played it on a game show, that'd be hard for a lot of people to get.
Is that your final answer?
I think one of the hallmarks of Genesis songs that sound like Phil Collins songs are when they include a drum machine, a piano, specifically the CP70, and a diminished electric guitar or a decreased use of electric guitar. Now, on In Too Deep, it's got that. So, yeah, that's definitely got that Mike vibe to it. But yeah, if it doesn't have that, that Mike and the Mechanics sound, that's when it really starts to sound more like a Phil Collins song. Which brings me to my next one. I personally don't think this next one is a Phil Collins song in any way, because I think it's more of a Mike and the Mechanics song, and that's Throwing It All Away. Now, you know my love for Throwing It All Away, and I saw a lot of you comments on my video about Throwing It All Away, about a lot of people, how much you guys love that song as well. Some people said it was a skipper.
You're dead to me.
But I could see, honestly, if you're going back to our dear friend in the dental hygienist, I could imagine you would have a hard time knowing the difference between Throwing It All Away. Is that Genesis? Can't Stop Loving You? Is that Phil Collins? You'll Be in My Heart? Is that Phil Collins? Like they all kind of have that mid-tempo, just beautiful melodies to them. So I know it's a Genesis song. I mean, for me, it's got that Rutherford riff that I love so much. And the chord changes. This is where Throwing It All Away is so beautiful. The chord changes that they do are just unreal. And it makes the song so unique, so difficult to write as a songwriter. You would never naturally write this song. The drums are very temperate. They're very held back. I just adore Throwing It All Away. The next one, very similar to In Too Deep. I already mentioned this. We're moving on now to We Can't Dance. The next one is Hold On My Heart, right? Hold On My Heart, definitely I could see, especially at the, in between But Seriously and tracks like Can't Turn Back the Years and Every Day. Hold On My Heart kind of falls right in between Do You Remember and Every Day. So I totally understand why people would think Hold On My Heart sounds like Phil Collins. And if I were to list all of these songs that I've done, I would put In Too Deep at number 1 and Hold On My Heart number 2 and Misunderstanding number 2 as like the most sounding like Phil Collins. Behind the scenes video that they did on the We Can't Dance tour in 92, I believe, an interviewer asked Tony Banks about this song and about how some people think of it as a Phil Collins solo song, which Phil was super ubiquitous. His tracks were all over the radio, more so than Genesis. So I can understand why people would be like, oh, this is another Phil Collins solo song. Tony resents that, obviously, and you can hear his influence in the intro, right? Very ominous chords, minor keys, and then the sun comes out when the lyrics come in, and it changes its tune a little bit. And I love that about this song. I really like this tune. I just feel like there's moments that really remind me that it's a Genesis song. That I will be there.
My singing was that bad?
There's just certain times the ominous keys in that bridge and in the intro and the bridge itself. You know, I have no trouble distinguishing this one being a Genesis tune. And that's what I love about today's subject on this video is that when you have songs that to the average person, In Too Deep and Hold On My Heart, sound like Phil Collins songs, we know they're Genesis songs. Okay, so I've got a couple more songs from We Can't Dance I want to talk about. I've decided to give this 9th slot to 2 songs. I have a tie because I think they kind of check the box similarly. And that is Tell Me Why from We Can't Dance and Never a Time. I love these songs. I like Never a Time. In fact, Never a Time is early on in the record. It's right after I Can't Dance. When you watch the making of this album, there was a little initial hope that this might have been the first single or a single. I think Rutherford brought it to the group, and there was just a bit of a feeling like this could be a single. And I think it was released as a single. I'll check in a second. I can show you. So Never a Time and Tell Me Why, they're just Phil Collins songs. Tell Me Why could appear on Dance into the Light. Tell Me Why could appear on Tarzan. Same type of feel. I love it. I think it's a great tune. I know a lot of our fans who would be ruthless with We Can't Dance would cut this or cut Never a Time. Never a Time reminds me of Love Police. It reminds me of No Matter Who. Just kind of like a nice, relaxing vibe, a mid-tempo vibe. So I could see these songs, and they're played on the radio occasionally, especially satellite radio. I could tell these would be songs where people would have a hard time telling the difference between, you know, is Tell Me Why from Testify or Dance into the Light, or is Tell Me Why from We Can't Dance. So great tunes though. That's why I tied them because they're so similar. And the last track on my list, which is also from We Can't Dance, is Since I Lost You. This song, I don't like having this on my list. I don't like having this song on We Can't Dance either, but I don't think this sounds like a Phil Collins song. But I also don't feel like it sounds like a Genesis song. To me, it's like, reminds me a little bit like a Please Don't Ask, but no, I just feel like it's too Tin Pan Alley. It sounds like just like a classic songwriter's song. Just really did not feel like Genesis, but also it sounds like something that Phil would have covered. It sounds more like Groovy Kind of Love or True Colors. It really does not sound like the innovative songwriting that Phil would do. I got in trouble for dissing this song when I reviewed We Can't Dance. Somebody in the comments did not like me dissing this song, but I have to diss it. All due respect to Eric and the tragic story around this song, but I could see though how, and this song doesn't get played on the radio, but I could see if somebody heard this, it definitely sounds more like a Phil Collins song than a Genesis song, but I don't even think it sounds like a Phil Collins song. Let me know what you think. I want to know what you think about my list. But more importantly, what did I miss? What do you think I missed from this list? Also, you know what would be a fun video maybe I'll do in the future is Phil Collins songs that could have been Genesis. In the Air Tonight for sure. Maybe Droned. Maybe Like China or Do You Know, Do You Care? Maybe Long, Long Way to Go. Imagine if Take Me Home was like a big blast out song like Fading Lights. Another Day in Paradise definitely is kind of ominous and dark. Well, there you go. I just made the list for you. Let me know what Phil Collins songs would make good Genesis songs. And let me know what Genesis songs sound too much like Phil Collins songs. Thanks for watching and please subscribe.